Man is such a vulnerable character, probably the most vulnerable character I have ever played. It's pure emotion all the time. Hey, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Congratulations on it, by the way. You were great,
Thank you.
of course. Now, Manny and Ray are, literal dope thieves, as the title says, yet Manny has a drug problem himself. Can you describe his relationship to those substances and kind of how it holds him back throughout the series?
Yeah, I think that Man is such a vulnerable character, probably the most vulnerable character I have ever played. It's pure emotion all the time. And what I think it's very interesting in this series is that both of them, him and Ray, but especially him, he spends the entire series, which is a very violent one, trying to break this cycle of violence, trying to get out of it, trying to get out of that place. He doesn't want to be there. They're not good at that. I think they're the anti-cliche of the tough drug guys. Like none of them are good at that thing, but especially Manny. And I think the drugs are one way out. It's one of the things that he finds to get away from that nightmare, that took his life.
He's also heavily religious. How does that drive his every choice, and what kind of pressure does it kind of put on his shoulders once they've, in the beginning, in the pilot, they choose that wrong house and things go sideways?
Yeah, the religiosity is another thing that only makes it worse because he has to believe in something. It's very tragic, man. I mean, I feel lots of empathy for Manny. He has to believe. He's constantly trying to find a way out. It could be the drugs, could be the religion, and Sherry is a very important character for him because Sherry represents the way out. But in order to do that, he has to break up with Ray, who is the only thing that he knows in terms of love and affection. The religion thing only makes it worse because I was raised Catholic too, and there's a lot of guilt and blame in that.
Yeah. I have to ask a quick unrelated question here. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, season 2, have we seen the last of your John, or are you done with that series for good?
Oh man, I'd love to be. I mean, if I guess there's gonna be a second season, but I'd love to be in it. But let's see. I'm not sure if I can say much. Yeah.
Well, so my first question for you both is: you guys both played DEA agents. With Mina being the one undercover. With Mina being the one undercover, can you both kind of describe the complicated relationships between you two that plays out over the course of the series?
Yeah, I mean, my character, I think, has some trouble with authority. She's also, I think, when we meet her, her undercover life is kind of subsuming her. She is not functioning very well as a person undercover, period. And her job is a little bit at risk anyway. And then she finds herself having to fight to stay on this job once she's been physically compromised. And, I personally would also agree probably more with Nader's assessment that she should take some time off and recover properly. But that's all she has in her life at this point. So she really, I think without that, she has nothing. So she needs something to hang on to and give her life purpose. And for the sake of the show having a central conflict for her to fight against, she needs the guy who's got to say no all the time. But it's for her own good. I get that.
Yes, it is. It was fun. It really was fun to have like meaty conflict, subtle nuance. We're on the same page. She's convincing me. I'm trying to convince her. I'm trying to protect her. I really have a big thing Peter and I talked about. I have to protect the department. There are politics he has to play. There are budget things he has to play. Things that, and she's like, what about getting the real guys or the right guys? And then who are those guys? One of his big assessments is he has to arrest the guys for the optics and the reality that killed Jack. Jack is a key character that dies, right away, uncovering his motives. And slowly over the series, he is seeing what she's saying, trying to get to the bottom of it. He's trying to do both. He needs her to be a witness. So is she undercover? Is she a witness? She needs to be off duty. She does pass her fitness for duty test. He gets to say it. He thought they'd have a great moment. She's still like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Get the real guys. So all of that, talking about it is bringing back memories of actually each episode, each scene had a new sort of unique obstacle, and sort of the I like this, the volume knobs, the mixtape.
Yeah, yeah.
It was great, and I do want to give a shout out to Will Pullen,
Yeah.
who played Mark Yeti, who was sort of our third wheel in all of these scenes, and added a great element of love and humor and
Yeah.
stuff. And yeah.
Now, Marin, your Mina's voice is basically shot the entire show. How did you approach, acting and bring the character to life with that added quirk?
Early on, I met with a speech therapist because I talked to Peter and I was like, I don't want to actually destroy my voice in order to make this accurate. And I met with this woman and we talked through a lot of the things and she helped me figure out a way to do it and get myself into that would sound consistent, but also it does change over the thing. And it really became a kind of its own thing over the kind of months and years, really, with the strike that we were interrupted. And we had a lot of time to kind of sit with the thing. But I really felt like living through as an actor, not being able to talk at all, having to write it, and then having to like work with the electrolarynx and find that thing. Peter and I talked, he was like, it's a little bit of a cliche, but he was like, she does find her voice over the course of the thing. And at the exact halfway point, we hear her real voice in the flashback. So, it was definitely like a real journey for me. And it was hard to find ways to sort of try to communicate in different levels. As an actor, you have pitch and you have volume to try to kind of play with, to find different levels in the scene, and to feel like I couldn't really play with either of those in that way. It was definitely a challenge. I was constantly giving myself like massages here at the end of the night because I found myself like the strain of this was definitely more than I was used to.
Congratulations on the show, first and foremost.
Thanks.
Of course. My first question, and this is for both of you, what do you feel Dope Thief achieves that many, if not any other shows, kind of manages to do to the same effect?
I think what this show does, that I think is kind of a staple in a lot of Apple shows, is that it has this sense of like this very cinematic sense to it. Every episode feels like a film, but it is able to like really drag you along in the way that a TV series does. It's this really great mixture of like feeling like each episode is a technical and artistic feat in itself, but it hooks you along in a very television way. I think it's a beautiful blend of those two things.
And this is nothing more or less than the genius of the writer. If it's not on the page, it cannot be brought to life. And the minute I got this pilot script by Peter Craig, I just sat bolt upright and said to myself, dear God, this guy can write.
Absolutely.
I mean, the nuance, the subtlety, the cleverness, the understanding of language, the understanding of exchange, discourse, on maybe 5 to 7 different levels. It's something quite serious is being said because somebody's been shot, but the words that are emerging from their mouths are funny. This is a gift. Very, very few writers have it in Hollywood, and Peter Craig has it in spades.
Yeah. Now, Kate, Theresa is an interesting mother figure to Ray. Can you kind of explain what separates her from what you think a standard mom might look like?
Well, biology, for starters. Shall we go there? Yeah. I mean, I was a bad girl in my youth. And I fell in with a bad crowd. And I fell in love with the head of that bad crowd, played by Ving Rhames in the character of Bart. And he had a son by a woman who was a heroin addict. And I don't think I became particularly interested in that as Theresa until Bart was sent to jail. And then I'm facing this young boy. and I'm understanding that there's only one choice to be made. I mean, he is delivered unto the wolves, or he is delivered unto my bosom. And I say to him, come with me. At least together we stand a better chance than we do apart.
Yeah. Now, Nesta, Michelle is kind of thrown into the deep end of Ray and Manny's world, kind of without warning. Can you tease how she handles entering that world unexpectedly?
I guess I can say that she's well equipped. Michelle is very smart, and for being as young as she is, she's just like all the other characters in the show, that she's extremely complex, and she has seen the good side and the bad side, or the justice and injustice in the justice system, and she's more experienced than you would think.
Yeah. Last question for you both. If there were ever a season 2, what's something you didn't get to explore with your characters that you would like to see explored in the future?
I will go.
Go.
I would like to dive more into Quakerism. I thought it was so interesting that Michelle was a Quaker, and I would have liked to explore that religion more, because what I learned just by playing her was so fascinating and interesting, and so yeah, I would like to dive more into that aspect of her.
I agree with you. You see, that's exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about Craig's genius. That he would associate Michelle with Quakerism is fascinating. Mm-hmm. Very, very unusual choice. Immediately fascinating and interesting to the audience. As for Theresa, I wouldn't mind a little more retrospection. Let's go back and find out why it is she ended up where she did. How entrenched was she in that life? How dark, in fact, is she? Or how light? Where is her, I want to know the true denomination of her spirit. So the opportunities are endless. And if Peter writes it, beyond endless, to the moon.
Well, my name is Russ Milheim. I'm from The Direct. Thank you for talking to me today about the show.
Hey, Russ. Thanks.
First of all, congratulations on pulling it off, getting it together, and getting it out there. Great job.
Thank you.
My first question is, the show features a lot of kind of interesting, traumatic flashbacks that the characters see as they're going through the story, going through kind of an everyday moment. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about incorporating those into the show and how you feel that, that choice and their placement enhances the narrative as a whole?
Yeah, so the idea was, how do you do flashbacks without leaving the present? So the idea was that past trauma is just getting kind of swallowed by current trauma, or just sort of embedding with it. And how can you do that without really leaving the moment that we're in? So we would try to place characters in the middle of scenes and come in and out. We were going to do it initially just with a tilt shift and a little blurriness, but then when I saw it desaturated, I didn't mind the color. It was kind of a callback to what we were doing in the town. And I also liked that later on we could play with color and start to add things back in as memories started to eat each other.
Yeah. Now, I have a two-part question I had to ask. What are the odds of a season 2? And then also, at the end of the day, just how do you envision the long-term plan, schedule of the show? How many seasons do you think you might have in you for this story to unfold?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know it's going to sound crazy, but we don't know. We haven't even really all gotten together to talk about it yet. So there was the final episode was written in such a way that you could see where these characters were going to go in the future, but nobody's had the conversation yet about whether or not we're going to really do that.
Now, I have to throw in a quick unrelated question for you. You wrote the epic story for Gladiator 2. During that development, I was just curious, were there any notable ideas tossed around to potentially bring back for a cameo, a flashback, vision, or whatnot of either Russell Crowe or Joaquin Phoenix?
Yeah, there was for Russell. There was a draft I had where So there was an idea that the Romans had that you could talk to your ancestors, and they have these underground catacombs where people's urns and ashes and bones were all buried beneath the city. There had been a scene where once Lucius finds out that it's his father, he goes down there and he finds his grave, and there was just going to be a really brief flashback with Russell. They, you know, I'm not. I think they probably made the right decision not using it. So it's, but I was on that with Ridley for a while. I'm actually left to do this show. And I sort of gave them a big menu of stuff, and they selected some things from it, and I think they left a lot of the right stuff off of it.
Yeah. Now, back to Dope Thief. The show's actually based on a book.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of describe what are some of the biggest changes that you made for this series when adapting it from the original book?
Yeah, and Dennis is a great writer, a great guy. I love him. I'm glad I'm going to see him tomorrow here. I really adapted the first half of the book, and then the second half of the book is very internal. The initial dilemma, kind of the inciting incident, is solved at the midway point of that book, and then it becomes a different story, and it's very reflective. It becomes a little more of a, he described it this way, so I'm not saying anything he wouldn't like. It becomes more of a literary novel in the second half. And he knew I'm not really a literary writer. So what I did is I took the inciting incident and I took the first half of the book, and I just stayed in the crisis the whole time and developed a couple other threads and just continued that through to, you know, a similar emotional end for some of the characters, but a different end for a lot of them.